Hello, my name is Ethan Heil. Today I'll be presenting my presentation over what life would be like without coal. And my title for this presentation was I'm just an old chunk of coal, but I'm going to be a diamond someday. I did this to pay tribute to the recent passing of famous Texas country musician Billy Joe Shaver, who died this year. But this is one of the lines from his bigger songs, I'm just an old chunk of coal. So I just felt like that'd just be a fun title to include in the presentation. All right, so let's start with a brief history of coal. So, some of coal's earliest uses were done by the Native Americans and Aztecs. So, they would use them for various things such as heating, cooking, and pottery making, along with some other traditional uses such as funerals. You also have the Industrial Revolution, which was what pushed coal towards a modern society, or how coal pushed us towards a modern society. So you had mechanical energy, the rise of factories, iron smelting. Iron smelting was a great way to melt down iron ore into pure iron, and iron ore was this light, durable material, and it was also very cheap. So it was great for new materials for building. You also had the steam engine, which was able to globalize the economy, and it just paved the way for modern transportation. And also, you had electricity. Electricity, in my opinion, would not have been as good today as it is without coal. And then so modern day, even today, we still have a lot of steel production. You have silicone production. So a lot of the products that we use are they come from burning coal to make silicone. And then also just many manufacturing plants and electrical plants still use coal as a power source. So, what society would look like today without coal? So, let's look at some of the things that coal is being used for in our modern society. So, I believe it would be harder for manufacturing. The top resource, coal is one of the top resources for manufacturing. China actually burns 50% of the world's coal consumption. So, I mean, if you think about it, if coal were to never exist, China may never have become the economic powerhouse that it has become today if it didn't have such a cheap, reliable energy source, and in such an abundance. Also, it would be harder for country development. You have countries such as India who burn fossil fuels for electricity grids. A lot of people still don't have, electricity in their own home, which is something that's very common here in the United States. And without coal, uh, I mean that the country might collapse under itself if it were not for coal, a cheap, reliable source towards this country, then it might not have the means to modernize because so many of our new renewable resources are quite expensive, such as hydropower and electricity and solar power. Then you would also have a shift in the global economy, especially our own. 15% of our coal is exported to other countries. So you would see a complete change in the global economy. And then also, I believe that we would have a heavily underdeveloped transportation system. Coal paved the way for modern transportation, such as the steam engine. I feel like we wouldn't have had the scientific development that we have today without it. I mean, back then, when coal was first being used to power these machines, little was known about electricity and types of uh, other types of fuel sources such as liquid fuels. Science was nowhere even near close to developing that. Oil during this time was also not in use. So it would have been very hard to find another type of fuel for transportation, and the consequence of that being that we uh, we wouldn't have what we have today without coal. So, how would this make life harder? So, we would have to find alternative fuel sources. We would have less fossil fuels. Coal is one of the most abundant fossil fuels. If we were to burn through, let's say our oil, our natural gas, our other types of fossil fuels, then we would have to completely change the way that we use energy. We would have less modern development, like I stated before, in transportation and manufacturing. because coal did pave the way for a modern economy and modern transportation. And it would also be harder to make synthetic fuel. Synthetic fuel is a scientific development in recent years where we take uh, liquidized plant matter and then we also gasify the elements in coal in order to make a less potent greenhouse gas, and it would be much harder to do that. So what could we not do? We could not provide a cheap and abundant fuel to the global economy and manufacturing. We wouldn't be as efficient in producing products. Many third world countries depend on coal because they don't have the means to choose alternatives. Like I said, India, they are pretty heavily underdeveloped compared to us, and without our exports to them, um, they may never rise out of that streak of poverty. And then building on top of that, many countries just cannot modernize. So why society cannot function like it does today? So my belief is that coal pushed us towards modernization. When the science wasn't there, we developed the science through coal. Coal was the king in the first industrial revolution. It was one of the biggest ways that we produce iron ore. In fact, it was the first major way we produced iron ore. It powered steamships and it globalized our economy. So, in conclusion, coal pushed the world towards modernizing manufacturing and transportation. And there was just little knowledge about what else we could do in terms of energy other than depend on wind power to push our boats across the ocean to hopefully land in the right place. So what other innovations would be affected? So like I stated, the synthetic fuel development. So synthetic fuels, they reduce the usage of crude oil and just burning straight fossil fuels, and they make a less potent greenhouse gas. But without the usage of because coal is one of the most abundant um, fossil fuels that we have in the world right now, then it would be much harder to make them in such an abundance. Now, could they still be developed? Yes. Synthetic fuels can also be developed from natural gas and other petroleum products such as methane. And it is simply easier with coal because of its abundance. If it were not for coal's abundance, then it would also be harder to produce synthetic fuels. And without coal, it would be quite harder to produce synthetic fuels, or at least keep them around for as long as we have. And synthetic fuels are used in our cars. They're used to power motors, all types of things. So explaining my research. So I used a historical approach. I looked at was uh, where was science at during different time periods. So the main thing I fed off was the Industrial Revolution, and just looking at where science was at, where we didn't understand much about electricity or alternative fuel sources. Coal it just seemed to be uh, the easiest way to push towards a modern society. And so also we also have a modern approach. I looked at how much we still depend on coal today, and if we didn't have it, I looked at the hypothetical sense of where we might be without it. And you would think coal would be an outdated fossil fuel, but it really isn't. It is still a highly used fossil fuel, and without it, the world might very well be in trouble. So, thank you. That was my presentation, and that's it.